Next time you watch an action movie and hear a pilot shouting Mayday, Mayday, try switching on your inner skeptic for a second, because that word doesn't actually mean anything in English. It sounds like someone yelling the name of a month while a plane is falling out of the sky. Even more ironic, it has absolutely nothing to do with May at all. And yet, it has saved millions of lives for over a century. Strange. Right. A global language of emergency, survival, and hardened aviators, born from something that almost feels like a prank. And the person behind it wasn't a linguistic genius, nor an aviation academic, but an airport radio officer, just an ordinary guy. Except he happened to invent a word the entire world would end up using. Buckle up, because the origin of Mayday is a historical plot twist that's hard not to laugh at. Let's rewind 100 years. London. Itenjo by Arshasan. The sky back then wasn't filled with radar and GPS like today. Aircraft flying between England and France were more like experimental birds, half engineering, half prayer. There was no universal distress phrase. Every country improvised. British pilots spoke the British way. French pilots shouted in French, and the people on the ground just hoped their ears wouldn't betray them. In the middle of that chaos, the British Air Ministry pushed one man to find a solution. That man was Frederick Stanley Mockford, a radio operator at Croydon Airport. Put yourself in his shoes, modest pay, overwhelming work. And suddenly someone hands you a mission that sounds like, sit down and fix aviation communication for the whole world. Honestly, most of us would have asked for 3 days off, but Mockford didn't run. He understood that an emergency signal had to be simple, sharp, and capable of punching through the brutal radio noise of the era. Even more importantly, both British and French pilots had to recognize it instantly. London-Paris flights were like a fragile airborne bridge, and without a shared language. Disaster was only a matter of time. Somewhere inside Croydon Airport, a strange little word began forming in his mind, a word so unlikely that even he probably didn't imagine how far it would travel. People expected Mockford to invent something fancy, maybe an aeronautical emergency descriptor, a phrase that sounded like it came straight from a boardroom on the 19th floor. But no, he solved the problem like a clever, slightly lazy student. He recycled what already existed. During radio exchanges with French crews, Mockford often heard pilots shouting "Venez m'aider," which means "come help me." In that phrase, the sound "m'aider" is pronounced almost exactly like Mayday. Short, clear, perfect for radio transmission. So instead of creating something entirely new, the British radio officer simply borrowed the sound and turned it into an English-friendly distress call. Here's the part that makes me laugh. There was no massive committee meeting, no endless voting process, no 100 page technical report. Mockford sliced a French phrase into a new word, gave it the job of saving lives worldwide, and submitted it. And aviation authorities approved it. No revisions, no protests, no rebranding. In the blink of an eye, Mayday, a hybrid child of convenience and practicality, became an international standard. Funny, isn't it? A word that appears in thousands of life-and-death moments carries almost no scientific grandeur. It's basically a trimmed-down French pronunciation that slipped into history. And the twist doesn't end there. Because the way Mayday spread across aviation is just as bizarre. Once adopted, the global aviation community finally breathed easier. At last. There was a word powerful enough to cut through radio static. But here's the amusing part. Many English speakers genuinely thought Mayday had something to do with the month of May. They had no idea it was just Mater in disguise. Then the world started repeating it: movies, cockpits, training manuals, everywhere. Every time you hear Mayday, you think of danger. But in the mind of its creator, it might have been nothing more than, that sounds usable. Let's go with it. The real plot twist is this: a century of global rescue standards wasn't crafted by some all-knowing committee. It was shaped by one guy borrowing a French sound because it worked. and history embraced it as if it had always been inevitable. In a world where innovation often feels overly dramatic, the idea that a word saving millions of lives came from such simple practicality makes me appreciate aviation history even more. It proves that many great inventions don't begin with genius, they begin with humans choosing what's easiest to say, easiest to hear, and easiest to understand. Think that's the end? Not quite. There's another turn coming that you'll definitely want to hear. If this story made you smile at the randomness of history, you might laugh even harder when you learn that Mayday isn't the only signal borrowed from French. The sky holds another phrase lighter in tone but just as important, pan-pan. And guess what? It's another linguistic remix. If you're curious to decode the unwritten rules of the sky, where syllables decide who gets priority to survive, you already know what to do. Hit follow so you don't miss the next episode. Never say pan-pan until you know this rule. And if you enjoy content that exposes the oddly humorous loopholes of technical history, I promise this series will be more addictive than a detective drama.